Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. My name is Miyu Kumakura. I am a sophomore studying government at the college, and I'm a member of the JFK Jr. Forum Committee here at the Institute of Politics. Before we begin, please note the exit doors, which are located on both the park side and the JFK Street side of the forum. In the event of an emergency, walk to the exit closest to you and congregate in the JFK Park. Please also take a moment now to silence your cell phones. Please take your seats now and join me in welcoming the Treasurer of the Institute of Politics Student Advisory Committee, Olivia Ferdinand.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Ferdinand and I'm the Student Treasurer of the Institute of Politics. On behalf of Harvard Kennedy School Dean Doug Elmendorf and IOP Director Mark Guerin, it is my great honor today to introduce Ambassador Caroline Kennedy and Senator Ed Markey. From 2013 to 2017, Ambassador Kennedy served as the United States Ambassador to Japan. She is also an attorney and the editor of 9 books on constitutional law, American history, politics, and poetry. A graduate of Harvard University and Columbia Law School, we at the IOP are very grateful for Ambassador Kennedy's continued support and service as the honorary chair of the Senior Advisory Committee. Senator Ed Markey has had a long history of serving Massachusetts. He also has a special connection to the IOP. In 2004, Dr. Susan Blumenthal, his wife, was an IOP resident fellow. After attending Boston College and Boston College Law School, Senator Markey served in the U.S. Army Reserve. He was the U.S. representative for Massachusetts' 7th Congressional District for 37 years and became Dean of the Massachusetts delegation. Elected to the Senate in 2013, Senator Markey has shown a deep commitment to Massachusetts and to public service. Now, please join me in welcoming Ambassador Kennedy and Senator Markey.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It is a great honor for the Kennedy School and for the Institute of Politics and for me personally to welcome you to your first IOP Forum. It took us so long to get this together, but our timing is incredible. What an amazing week to have Senator Markey here. The Institute of Politics was established as a memorial to my father to bring practitioners and students together to inspire careers in public service, and I can't think of anyone who would be better to talk about that today. Your friend, my Uncle Teddy, was devoted to the IOP, and he gave as much here as he gave to the Senate, so he would be unbelievably thrilled that you're here. And I wanted to also just describe to you that we have here students from institutes of politics type places from all over the country that are here gathered for this weekend. So this is their kickoff event. Wow. And it couldn't come at a better time because you may have been in Congress for almost as long as I can remember, but I would say working hard on the issues that for the last 2 weeks have been front page news every single day. So congratulations and thank you on behalf of all of us for your leadership on climate, on technology, on nuclear disarmament, and so many other things. And first of all, we want to congratulate you on the Green New Deal.
Thank you.
So I think that since you just introduced it yesterday, maybe you could just tell all of us a little bit about why now, what's going to be different this time, and if you're worried about anything.
Well, I am in politics, so only the paranoid survive. So you always should be worried. Okay, that's lesson number one. You never assume that it's going to go the way that you had planned it to go. So you have to always be anticipating things could be changing. But I will say, just to begin, What an honor it is for me to be here with you after your great service as our ambassador to Japan. How proud we all were having you represent our country. And I know how proud Japan was to have you as our ambassador, and what an impact you made as a woman ambassador to Japan. And by all accounts, your ambassadorship had a profound effect upon how they began to look at women in that country. So we thank you for all of your service and for everything that your family has done for our country. And this Kennedy School is like a breeder reactor of political activism to go out into the political system. And we thank you, Dean Elmendorf, Mark Guerin, for everything you do all day. And thank you, Olivia, for that great introduction. And yesterday, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I introduced the new Green Deal. And we had put together the resolution over the preceding 6 weeks, trying to find a way in which we would define the scope of the problem and then define the scope of what the response has to be. And then try our best to mobilize House and Senate members to begin to work together on this issue. And we had a phenomenal press conference yesterday with senators and House members, with 350.org, with Sunrise, with the League of Conservation Voters, with the Sierra Club, but with unions as well, who all know that it is possible to save all of creation by engaging in massive job creation. That there is an opportunity here to revolutionize the way in which blue-collar workers are able to participate in our economy. We now have 350,000 wind and solar workers. They're roofers, they're electricians. We have 50,000 coal miners, 350,000 people in wind and solar. But we're going to go to millions. We're going to go to millions. And we have to, because the United Nations and their scientists last year said that the danger date is now 2030. That it's even worse than anyone thought. And it's the consensus of the United Nations scientists. All of the agencies of the Trump administration, all of their scientists came together. They issued a report. They said it's much more dangerous and that something has to happen much sooner. So the science is clear. And when you come from Massachusetts and you're in the United States Congress and you have MIT and Harvard within 2 miles of your house, you know that science is sacred. Okay, so that's my job. My job is to represent the science every day, which is what I've done in my career down in Washington. And so what we have to do then is put together a plan to deal with the problems. So what Alexandria and I, what Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and I decided to do was we would put together a 10-year plan to mobilize this country to be able to deal with the issue. And to call for a goal of 100% renewable, clean energy, non-polluting energy, and to challenge the country to meet that goal. Because failure is not an option. And the rest of the world will not provide the leadership. Only we can provide the leadership, the United States. They're going to look to us. And we can't be the laggard, we have to be the leader. You cannot preach temperance from a bar stool. You cannot tell the rest of the world what to do if you yourself are not, in fact, engaging in the actions which you have to put in place. So the planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets. So we have to put in place this plan. So our goal is to create a national movement in every city and town across this country to try to pass the laws in the House and Senate signed by President Trump in 2019 and 2020. And if not, we're going to turn this into a voting issue in the 2020 elections all across this country. And we're going to make this something that everyone has to deal with and be made accountable for, because the science is unquestionable. And we can now feel the green generation rising up, demanding that a solution be put in place so that we can avoid the worst, most catastrophic consequences.
Okay, well, sign me up, and I hope everyone here will go back to your campuses and,
Right.
and share the senator's plan. One of the other issues that you have been a longtime leader on is telecommunications, internet, cybersecurity, net neutrality. We saw rollback of those regulations this week, and then the companies not investing like they said they would.
Right.
What can we all do to advance that agenda, and how's that all going?
Well, I passed 3 bills as the telecommunications chairman in the 1990s. In 1992, the 18-inch satellite dish revolution, so there'll be more pressure on terrestrial cable. Number 2, in 1993, I moved over 200 megahertz of spectrum, so there'll be a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th cell phone license in every market, and we moved immediately from analog to digital and dropped from 50 cents a minute down to 10 cents a minute, and everyone had a cell phone in their pocket by 1996. And the 3rd bill was 1996, the broadband bill, the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So on that day, when President Clinton signed the bill, he's a lefty, so he signed it, and not one home in America had broadband. Now you fast forward 22 years, and there's no 12-year-old in America who doesn't believe that a 50-inch HD interactive screen isn't a constitutional right. Okay? So we made a lot of progress. But the one thing that they defeated at the time was they defeated and I had it in the House version, but they pulled it out in the conference committee, that there would be a privacy bill of rights built across all technology platforms as a rulemaking by 1997 and 1998. But the one thing that I was happiest about was the kind of the open, chaotic nature of the internet would then make it available for any smaller company or individual to be able to use the internet. So that's another way of saying net neutrality, and another way of saying net neutrality is non-discrimination. That the big companies can't block you from getting in a non-discriminatory way. That you have equal access with your ideas. That if you're the Parkland kids, that you have equal access to the internet. It's not controlled by the big companies. If you're a young person with an idea and you want to reach all 320 million Americans, it can't get shut down. Well, that's net neutrality. So what happened with the Trump administration was one of the first things they did in 2017 was to take the net neutrality rules off the books. And since I was the original introducer of the concept, I was very angry. And under something called the Congressional Review Act, I was actually able to bring an amendment out onto the Senate floor, and it passed, which would overturn what they had done at the FCC. But the House was controlled by Paul Ryan. They never allowed it to have a vote, and so net neutrality was repealed. The case was heard in the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals last Friday. I went to the whole 5-hour case and sat on the side of the net neutrality proponents during the entire hearing. And in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to introduce a new law into the Senate that will put down a marker for where net neutrality should go, because it essentially is what we've been all about here in our society over the last 20 years. There was no Google, eBay, there was no Hulu, YouTube. You needed the broadband revolution, and you needed younger people to be able to get to the capital markets, to raise the money so that their idea could get unimpeded into the marketplace. So even when you think about Lyft, or you think about Pandora, or you think about Wayfair downtown, they all needed kind of the guarantee that they could go to their investors. You don't want them to have to go to get lawyers first. You want to have them go get money first so that they can get into that marketplace. So I'm going to continue to fight very hard on net neutrality. It is not unlike climate change. It's a generational issue. It's what the 21st century should be all about. And I am not going to go away until we restore it as the law of the land, because that's the way the internet should have a relationship with our whole country. And that's the Me Too movement, it's Black Lives Matter movement, it's the Parkland students movement. They can change America, but there should never be a question that it's unimpeded access to every single person in the country.
Since you've mentioned them a couple of times, I just want to recognize the Parkland students who are here, who will be receiving the New Frontier Award in a little while at our next event. So maybe you could just raise your hands or stand up just so that everybody can. Done.
Can I say that? David came into my office, some of them came into my office. They are incredible. It's just like they're genetically excuse me?
Where are you?
Yeah, genetically hardwired to create pain in the political process, okay? And I think when they're done, they're going to make NRA stand for not relevant anymore in American politics. So we thank you.
Thank you.
We thank you for that.
And is Mayor Tubbs here too yet, or? He's on his way. Okay, well, so I want to make sure that we give the students enough time to ask you questions. And one of the things we're doing after this is to give out the New Frontier Award, which is an award that is jointly given out by the Kennedy Library and the Institute of Politics for young elected officials who see a new frontier, just as President Kennedy did, and also people who are making a contribution that are not elected. And so this year we're really honored by the presence of the Parkland students and also by Mayor Tubbs, who is the youngest mayor in California. So, so given that there are people who are using the political process, who are entering politics like the mayor, and against a backdrop or a climate of disunity and disillusionment in politics, what would you say to people why did you go into public service? Or what would you say to people who are thinking about it, or who are thinking, well, I did think I wanted to do that, but I don't want to do that anymore because it doesn't look like any fun?
Yeah, well, my father drove a truck for the Hood Milk Company, graduate of the vocational program at Lawrence High School. My mother was the president of her senior class in high school, but in the junior year, her mother died. My grandmother died, and there were 5 daughters. So before Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the social safety net was one of the girls is going to stay home. So the older sister had to go to work, and my mother had to be the mother. So she never got to go to college. She never was able to maximize her. She used to do calculus at the kitchen table for fun, even though she never took it. Translate Latin. So we knew, my brothers and I, that she was smarter than us, but she would also let us know that we would never work as hard as my father, who drove the milk truck. That's a hard job, getting up at 4 a.m. to put milk bottles on the doorstep. So in Malden, growing up, I would lie on the rug, and I was Irish, I was Catholic, and then all of a sudden, on television, there's an Irish Catholic young man from Boston who is running for president. But people are saying that he cannot win because he is Irish and Catholic and from Boston. So I took an interest in that. That seemed to be a limitation on me. And then, remarkably, this young man won, and he was the president. And he said to all of us, and we were all looking at this screen at the inauguration. You can only imagine what that was like. And it turned out it wasn't just Irish Catholic boys, but Irish Catholic girls and Italian boys and Italian girls and Polish boys and Polish girls and black boys and black girls and Hispanics. It was everyone who wasn't part of that ruling establishment from the preceding 200 years who are watching that. And he said, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. And that became a change in our country. And it was no longer about the past, it was about the future and what we could do to make a difference. So for me, that was the moment. And from that moment on, the first lawyer I ever met was the first law professor that walked into my class. The first time I ever went to Washington was to be sworn in as a congressman on my first visit. I had never been there. I'm from Malden. My father works for the Hood Mill Company. I had never been there. But there was a vision. It was created for public service that I accepted, and I think millions of other people did as well. And the Kennedy School, the Kennedy Institute is kind of the memorialization of that. Okay, it will continue on forever, right? To ensure that generation after generation have an ability to be able to make their contribution to our country. So that is, in fact, my story. And when I was elected, I was able to serve with Ted Kennedy, who was in the Senate. And I was able to serve with Ted Kennedy in the United States Senate for 30 years as a member of the House of Representatives. And it was just such a great honor for me to be able to partner with him on so many of these great causes that have animated the body politic of our country for generations now. So thank you, Caroline.
One of the things about Teddy, and you definitely keep that spirit alive, is the joy that public service brings. And I think the sense that when you're engaged in something that important that can really affect people's lives, you can also bring a sense of hope and joy and fun to this enterprise. And I'm grateful to you for keeping that alive as well. Just before we turn it over to the students, you were part of the sort of unbelievable, legendary Massachusetts delegation, Tip O'Neill, Sil Conti, Eddie Bolin, all these names that mean probably nothing to most of the people here, but you've served with Newt Gingrich, Tip O'Neill, now Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. What makes a great speaker?
What makes a great speaker? Whatever it is that magical recombinant political DNA that made Tip O'Neill and Nancy Pelosi, okay? And it's part how they grew up. One had a father who was like the political boss in Cambridge here, Tip O'Neill. One of them had a father who was the mayor of Baltimore. And everyone should remember, she's Marin County on the outside. She's Baltimore on the inside. Donald Trump has learned that, okay? Do not cross, Nancy Pelosi. So they each have this beautiful combination in graciousness and humor, which you need to have. But underneath it, it's the toughness that you also need if you're going to be able to achieve big things. And Teddy always had that. It was always like the most personable guy in the room. So when I got elected, I'm like the kid congressman, and I'm down there, and now I'm in a room with Tip O'Neill and Ted Kennedy and all the rest of our incredible delegation. Father Drynan's in the room, and you have no idea. It was incredible. It's like one big kind of, Mount Rushmore of Massachusetts politics. Then the door closes, okay? And the laughter ended, and the business of how Massachusetts is going to get twice as much as any other state in every bill, okay? And I would just sit there and watch, this incredible group of politicians now figure out what they were going to get out of President Carter or President Reagan or whoever it was, or what the strategy was going to be to bend them to our will in Massachusetts. Because we're not an ordinary state, We may be the Bay State, but we're really the brain state, you know what I mean? That's why you're all here. And so that's kind of reflected in this only 2% of America's population, but we're not an ordinary 2% when we're in that room. And politically, the excellence that I was able to see immediately is something that still lives with me, And but when they went outside, Tip and Teddy would be telling the jokes to the crowd and whatever, and buddy, old pal, But it was all towards getting the votes, towards getting us twice as much as any other state. Okay, that was always how it worked. So
well done.
Yeah, well done.
So I think it's about time for our audience to have questions for the senator. So if you would like to line up at the microphones, that would be great. And I have been asked to remind you to keep your questions and please tell us your name and where you're from, and go right ahead.
Hello, Senator Markey, thank you for coming today. My name is Diego Garcia. I'm a junior at the college from Fairfax County, Virginia.
Beautiful.
And I'm just wondering what role you see for nuclear energy in the Green New Deal.
Nuclear energy is in trouble in the marketplace. There are 2 nuclear power plants that are now being constructed in Georgia. They would generate about 2,200 megawatts of electricity, but they have a federal loan guarantee because it's hard to build a nuclear power plant unless this socialistic system isn't in place that guarantees them. You know, the federal government picks up the loss if they go bankrupt. And I don't like socialism, but when it comes to the energy industry, they love socialism. They love all the tax breaks and all of the legal protections which they can receive. So what I had my staff last week do was take the, it's a great question you're asking, take those 2,200 megawatts and so far the $27 billion that has been spent on these 2 plants, and they're still 5 years from completion, and they're 5 years behind schedule, but they're still 5 years from completion, and just translate that into how many megawatts of electricity would we get for $27 billion, and it's 3 times more than nuclear. So if you're an executive across the country who runs a utility right now, with wind and solar energy efficiency now at such low prices, I think it's going to be a hard decision for them to make and to convince their board that they should move in that direction. At the same time, it can't be ruled out. That is, that if there can be a way in which they can figure out how to construct these plants and to do so in a cost-effective way. But for the most part, Adam Smith is rolling in his grave thinking about all of the federal subsidies that go to that industry, while wind and solar, we have to fight every 2 years to try to extend the tax break for these nascent industries that got nothing for 100 years, while the oil and gas industry, the nuclear industry have been subsidized. So under our proposal, if it isn't non-polluting, if it is renewable, if it is clean energy, then it can play a role, but it should compete in the marketplace. And I believe that if there is a full competitive marketplace, that wind and solar energy efficiency, geothermal are going to win. Just for your information, in 2018 there were 20,000 megawatts of wind and solar deployed in our country. To put it another way, the Seabrook nuclear power plant is 1,000 megawatts, 20,000 megawatts of wind and solar deployed. Last year there were 20,000 megawatts, 2017. This year there are going to be 20,000 megawatts. So that would be just 60,000 in 3 years, while there hasn't been a new nuclear power plant. And the only 2 that are under construction are only going to be a grand total of 2,000, and they're down in Georgia, and they're 5 years behind schedule. So just looking at it realistically and trying to assess between now and 2030 what's going to make the largest contribution to new electrical generation, which is non-greenhouse gas emitting, practically speaking, it's most likely to be wind and solar, and the price has collapsed, and energy efficiency is also there. And by the way, economic analysts believe that it's a $5 trillion marketplace. So there's going to be a lot of private sector interest into capturing this sector. And if we deploy 4 times more renewables as we have so far, and just increase our energy efficiency. And by the way, those are insulation unions. You know, those are just blue-collar people going in and doing the work on energy efficiency. We could meet the challenge, say, and provide $5 trillion worth of private sector, you know, profit making. So that's a tough environment for nuclear power, given the fact that they've only been able to build a handful since 1980. And so it's highly unlikely that it will play anything. It may play a role, but it will be a relatively small role compared to the renewable revolution. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lyle. I am a sophomore at the college. Thank you both for being here. My question is also kind of along the lines of the Green New
Great.
Deal, which you mentioned at the beginning you would like to see a voting issue in 2020. Another event happening in 2020 is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which provides an opportunity for a revitalization within the environmental movement. So my question is, what would you like to see from young people specifically to ensure that that revitalization happens and that it actually garners results?
Well, the first Clean Air Act was President Kennedy in 1963, which people forget about. Okay, so it wasn't the 1970 Act; it was the 1963 Kennedy Clean Air Act. Okay, and so that's where it began. And Jerome Wiesner, the president of MIT, was his science advisor, and he said we have to do something. So that's kind of the Constitution. That's where it all began. Earth Day in 1970 came after the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught on fire. Everyone was watching on television. A river is on fire. That's how many chemicals were in it. We had The Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, which had been written in campuses across the country. All of a sudden, there rose up an environmental movement, which did not exist. It was really started by Rachel Carson, this brilliant woman. It's a great documentary, by the way. It's like an hour and a half. Just go to this documentary, see the role this woman played in changing the whole attitude of our country. So that's what we need. We need a revival. Mark Twain used to say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does tend to rhyme. So here we are, we're back again with a president who gives a State of the Union address for an hour and 20 minutes and does not mention climate change. Does not mention the environment, does not even talk about an issue which is an existential threat to our planet, to our existence. So it's up to the green generation to rise up. It happened in the late 60s, and all of a sudden we have Earth Day, and by the way, Richard Nixon then signs the bill that creates the EPA. Trust me, it wasn't his idea, okay? Just trust me, okay? There was a political storm that rose up across our country, and all of a sudden, we need an EPA, right? But in 2019, EPA now stands for Every Polluter's Ally, and we all know it. Okay? They just named a coal lobbyist to be the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. I mean, how cynical is that? Right? So, this generation's challenge is you got to get up. You got to go out and work. That's what that generation did. This agency is now captured. It's no longer a watchdog. It's a lapdog. They're just taking regulations off the books. And so we need to not agonize, but organize. Okay? And it's got to be on every campus, every high school, every college, all across the country. It's got to be a voting issue. People have to say it's important. People have to make it personal. It is personal because it's going to happen in your lifetimes. The worst, most catastrophic consequences of it. But for some reason or other, Donald Trump and the Koch brothers think they're going to get away with it. You know what I think is going to happen? Now, and I'll tell you a little story. My bill passed on the House floor with Henry Waxman in 2009. That was called the Waxman-Markey bill. Okay, so it passed on the House floor, and it reduced greenhouse gases by 80% by 2050. 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050. And then died in the Senate. Mitch McConnell killed it in the Senate in 2010. But retrospectively, here's what we learned. That's when the Koch brothers and the polluters started spending their money, because we were polling at 70% when it started. They drove it down 20 points. They drove it down 20 points. So by 2010, we didn't have the political capital to get it over the finish line in the Senate, even though Obama was president. Well, now it's 2019. We got it back up to 73% across the whole country. You know what the difference is? We now have an army on our side. We now have money on our side, and we're ready to fight, okay? But you got to get up and go out and do it. And if we do it, good luck to the Koch brothers. Good luck to Peabody Coal. Good luck to the polluters, because we're going to make a metaphor out of the EPA in terms of what it is now doing. And that, when you become a metaphor, you're in trouble politically. Okay? That's all I can tell you. And so it's going to require a whole bunch of work by a whole bunch of creative social media geniuses to help to make sure that this becomes a voting issue. And I would say it really is the generational challenge. You know, we have to stop it. 2020 has to be the end of it, and we just remove anyone that is getting in the way of the green revolution, which is necessary in order to save this planet. We're running out of time, and Donald Trump and his cronies just have to be taught this lesson, and either they change the legislation, which is highly unlikely, or we change them and they're out of office. So that's your charge. That's why you're here at the Kennedy School. You're in the upper 1/2 of 1% of all the people who have ever lived in the history of the world just by being in this room. And President Kennedy used to say, to those whom much is given, much is expected. That's who you are. You are the people he was talking about. And so it has to be you, and you have to figure out a way of organizing around this. And in 2020, we'll have the national referendum on this issue. So go get them. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, good.
Hi, my name is Ben Bolger, and I'm a Harvard alum and a grad student. And my question is for Ambassador Kennedy. Obviously, it's very productive to have a positive relationship with Japan. And when you realized that President Trump was elected, how did you use your time as ambassador to help create an enduring relationship with Japan that might survive any disruption with the administrative change?
Well, we have here the chairman of the Asia subcommittee, so he also can speak to this. But Japan is our strongest ally in Asia, as many people know, and absolutely crucial to our leadership in Asia. And so as that region is becoming more and more important, I think anybody who's in office is going to see the importance of the U.S.-Japan alliance. And so even President Trump, I think, although he hasn't actually done too much to help our ally, recognizes that it is important. So I think that the U.S.-Japan relationship was in very strong shape under President Obama. He had put a lot more emphasis on the rebalance. He went to Hiroshima, the first sitting president to do so, and that meant a tremendous amount to the Japanese people. And TPP was the centerpiece of the rebalance strategy. So I think that the pieces are there, and the next president hopefully will be able to construct them back up into a even more positive. But Japan is a very loyal ally, and I think that there are many, many relationships that are very, very strong throughout the security realm, economic realm, and so I'm not worried about our alliance. But I think that the senator is one of the people to have gone to the North Korea-China border, and certainly what's going on with North Korea has a direct impact on Japan and also on our presence in the region. So I don't know if you have anything you'd like, any advice you'd like to give President Trump?
It's hard for me to follow on you. You are the expert on Japan. I am the top Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate on the Asia subcommittee. So I actually took a delegation there and to Korea and to China in August of 2017. And part of it was just to reassure Japan that we're on their side. We're still there to protect them. When the president says, I have a wonderful relationship with President Kim in North Korea, and don't worry about their nuclear program, believe me, they worry, because they don't think it's stopping. They think it's continuing. And it's our responsibility to ensure that we actually take the steps to keep the pressure on North Korea to end their ballistic missile and their nuclear weapons development program. And that's key for our alliance with Japan and with South Korea as well. We have to give them those assurances. And so that's why it was great to have Ambassador Kennedy there in Japan, because that was a constant reassurance and they need to have it. But the president, I think, is a little bit out of contact with the facts, let's just say that, in terms of North Korea, and wishful thinking cannot replace hard analysis for what is actually going on. And even the intelligence experts who testified last week had to admit that there was no evidence that the North Koreans were stopping their program. And so that's key for Japan. It's key for all of our allies in the region. And ultimately, if they progress, it will be key to our own security in the United States if they develop an ICBM program that they can put a miniaturized nuclear weapon on top of. So we have a stake in the long term in making sure we protect Japan and the other allies right now. So thank you, sir.
Is it my turn? Okay. Hi, my name is Eskar. I'm a physician and a current grad student here at the School of Public Health. I'm also a Zimbabwean who has in the US here survived and dealt with housing insecurity, homelessness, and food insecurity. And so my question is, one thing, I'm so grateful to be here at Harvard, but it's dawned on me that making it in terms of the educational pipeline isn't enough for low-income students, for students from slum communities, from students from high-density communities, even here in Boston. So what are we doing, or what do you hope to do in order to give more, whether it's mental health services support or even just mentorship, your presence in some of the schools here in Mattapan and Roxbury, all across the country, even northern, other northern rural states, because, I think we celebrate the one kid who made it, who was good in school. And it's a lot, and I'm tired. And so to expect, once we get to Harvard, to then go back and be the savior for a community without more support is a lot. So is it in your mission, at least, to go back and help those kids in those communities who need you?
So I grew up in Malden. My wife and I still live in the same house in Malden. And Malden High School last year, 65,000 people. It's like 3 miles from here. Graduating class was 28% white, 25% Asian, 24% black, 23% Latino. The most diverse high school in the United States. 28, 25, 24, 23. Mm-hmm. Okay. But it's the same income level as when I was growing up. We're still in the bottom 25 percentile in Massachusetts of the 351 cities and towns. Now, when I was growing up in Malden, in that same community, my mother and father worked for the Hood Milk Company. My mother doesn't work. She stays home. But all 3 boys are going to go to Boston College and Boston College Law School. Commuters, but still. Well, think about 3 kids growing up in that same house today. Boston College is $70,000 a year. Times 3 kids, $210,000 a year. Times 7 years to get through law school, $1.5 million for that education. Well, those kids can't go there. There'll be some kid from a suburb who'll get that seat. Okay? Not because they're smarter than the kid from Malden, but because the family just can't afford it. And that's probably a third of the class at every single good school in America, that those kids just can't go because they can't afford it. Huh? And that's not right. Now, we also have a funding problem. Because Malden's not rich the way Mattapan's not rich, Brockton's not rich, Lawrence is not rich, Lynn's not rich. So the kids are just as smart as they were when I was growing up. But we could afford to go to college. I could work in the summer, I could make the money, I could take out the loan, and I could pay it back within the 10 years, no problem. That's not true today. So I would put that near the top of the list, where we have now become a society with mobility which is limited. And that's unacceptable in a United States that has always had that vision that you could reach the American dream, or your own personal dream, whatever you want it to be. I became a congressman. I'm running for the Congress at age 29. My father's a milkman. I've never been to Washington, and I can do it. I raised $50,000 to run. Today, that same kid has to raise $2 to $3 million. It's not happening in this modern society. Money. Right? So I put that at the top of the list. And you know what I learned too, because we live on the same street. Across the street is the Haitians, the Chinese, the Brazilians. Our whole street now is from other countries. And the mother and father are working. And they might come home at 1 in the morning. You can hear the cab from Cambridge pulling into the driveway in Malden as they've just finished their last route. They're killing themselves, and they still can't afford to send their kid. And they're still expected to take care of their kids, to make sure that all of their mental health problems and all the other issues that they might have are going to be taken care of. So we have to change the funding formula. You cannot have money as the determinant of what your ability is in order to maximize your God-given abilities. And we have to democratize access to opportunity through education and healthcare in our country. And we are far from completing that mission. And even though Massachusetts is #1 in math, verbal, and science at the 4th, 8th, and 10th grades, and we are #1 in America, we know how much work we still have left to do. And you're putting your finger right on it. Okay? This whole mobility issue is at the center of this problem that we have in our country, that even after the Great Recession, that 94% of all of the profits went to the wealthiest in our country and left almost nothing for these people who are in the bottom, okay? And that's where I live every day, okay? And they're working just as hard as any other group of immigrants has ever worked, okay? And they get stigmatized because of the countries that they all come from now in Malden. As the president says, we're gonna make America great again, and he really is making America hate again, okay? So they have to live with that as well, as they are walking around the streets of our country. So for me, I put that at the top of the list because I'm here. I'm here as an American story, right? That there were no limits. And my mother always told me that because of what happened to her family, her mother, she didn't get the opportunities which she should have had. Back in Ireland, they weren't doing so great. No one leaves the country because they're doing great in that country, okay? We all share that in common. So when my grandmother and grandfather got off the boat in Malden, it was because they weren't doing great in the old country. And I just hate the whole idea of people pulling up the ramp. Our people have made it. Now we've moved to the suburbs. Who cares about this next generation? Well, the next generation is the 21st century for our country. So that's why we have to invest in community colleges. I talked to the Bunker Hill Community College president, the Roxbury Community College president. Here's what they'd like, amongst other things. If you are a kid at Malden High School in Roxbury, how about a way for free, if you're a junior, let's say, you just go over and take the college credits beginning at Bunker Hill so you can start to get used to it because you've never had anyone in your family in college, for full credit. How about a way of ensuring that we're thinking through what these families are going to need for the ideation, right? So how can you maximize your God-given abilities in this country? So there's many different ways in which we can look at this issue, but at its heart, it's a money issue. And when these tax cuts, for the wealthy in the Trump era get passed, all that money's just going to come out of programs that could have helped our country be far greater if we had invested in these generations of young people in Malden, in Boston, in Cambridge, but all across the country who really do represent that entrepreneurial spirit, that sense of hard work that really has transformed our country over 200 years and will continue to do so if we're a wise people. And I think that's going to be on the ballot as well in 2020. I think this whole issue of how we treat immigrants, how we treat minorities, how we have an administration which is dismissing them for political reasons is going to be something that's going to be challenging the conscience of our country. And my belief is that if you're all out there and we're all out there, that we're going to win this referendum and we're going to change the budgets of our country to reflect the priorities that we should have for the 21st century. So thank you, and thank you for what you do with your family too.
My name is Zizi. I am a sophomore at the college from Weston, Massachusetts, and I had a question about the Green New Deal.
Great.
It does sort of seem fairly obvious that the deal will need a little bit of bipartisan support. And so my question is, what is the incentive for members of Congress, and obviously the president himself, to sign on?
What is the what?
The incentive for members of Congress and the president himself to sign on to a solution for a problem that they don't even believe exists.
Okay, that's great. So the question isn't, will every Democrat sign on to the Green New Deal? The question is, will any Republican sign on to the Green New Deal? And again, the problem is that their paymasters are the Koch brothers, they're the oil companies, they're the polluters. They're the largest contributors to the party. So we have a dilemma. And that's why you're here at the Kennedy School. Because we know that in polling, the public agrees with the Green New Deal. It polls off the charts. Public wants this wind, solar, all-electric vehicle, battery revolution. They want to see it happen. So we just have to be more creative, more effective in engaging the political system. Give Trump credit, he won. He targeted the parts of the country that he thought he could influence, and he pulled it off. So the challenge that comes back to us is, what are we going to do? Are we going to work smarter and not harder? Well, that's who you all are. You know, what are those strategies that we're going to reach the people who we know agree with these issues and then get them out to vote? So liberals are usually right, but too soon. So sometimes you got to wait for the country to show up, catch up with us. And we're Massachusetts, so we do gay marriage first. We do, universal health care first. We go first and say, it's safe. The Commonwealth survived, okay? You can try it too. So a big part of this is you just have to go out there. We have the strongest gun laws in the United States. We also have the lowest gun fatality rate in the United States. I wonder if there's a correlation. Huh? So a big part of what we have to do is just change the laws. And again, this movement that David and the others are up there, they weaponized that issue, okay? And we can put that issue on the ballot as well, universal background checks, no gun show purchases without a background check. They just did it in 2018, but it'll be much bigger. Same thing is true with wind and solar and all electric vehicles and reducing greenhouse gases, saving the planet. We're going to run about $30 to $40 trillion worth of damage to our country by 2100 if we do not stop this greenhouse gas epidemic. So we have to figure out how to weaponize it, and then Donald Trump might not cave, but I think a lot of Republicans who have suburban districts all across the country are going to be wondering, whether or not they're jeopardizing their own seats. Politics is a stimulus response business, and there's nothing more stimulating than millions of people who are rising up to threaten you and your job as a United States congressman or senator. And so it's all education, activation, implementation. You have to put it together, the plan, and go out there and do it. The raw material for an incredible political revolution is there in 2020. And every day, Donald Trump makes it easier for us to make the case that we have to make the fundamental changes. So thank you. Good question. Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is April. I'm a first-year JD candidate at Harvard Law School. It's a pleasure being here. I'm from Beijing, China. My question for you is that, for you both actually, Ambassador and Senator, is that you both went to law school. So I was curious about the thinking like a lawyer aspect and how that plays a huge part into your public service dimension, your careers. Thank you.
About the what?
So at law school, we talk a lot about thinking like a lawyer. So I was thinking about the ways that you think like a lawyer in your later public service careers.
Okay, great. You want to?
Well, as somebody who went to law school but never really practiced law, I would still say that there are so many opportunities, and every single one of them is enhanced by the legal training that you receive. And so I think that whether it's knowing how to mobilize on an issue or how to advocate for your cause, or obviously in the practice of law, and certainly dealing in an international context, I think having the legal training is more important than ever. I have one of my children is in law school now, so I'm excited to see all over again and how much more dynamic I think the legal education has become. So I'm sure you're having an incredible experience, and I hope that you will go on to give back with all that you've learned and been given at Harvard Law School, because it's an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, I guess I would say to you is that I went to law school so I could become a politician. And that was my goal. But I really thought that law school would be like the mental heavy lifting that you would need in order to understand how laws are made, how to look at laws and understand that if they're not written very carefully, that they may not actually achieve their intended effect. But also to think of it as like a public policy forum for 3 years, because you have to understand why each one of these laws got put on the books that you're now being asked by your professor in class to analyze. So it was but I had become so concerned that I might fall into the trap, because I was given these offers from big law firms to come and work as a summer associate for much more money than I would have been making if I went into public service. So you have to avoid the trap. It's like quicksand, And the thing I learned in geology class is that the more you wiggle in quicksand is actually the deeper you go. If you don't wiggle, you don't go down, but you get in deeper and deeper as you're in these summer associate jobs, and you can see all the money. And now, oh my goodness, I know I wrote on my application I wanted to save the world, but maybe I'll do it in 5 more years or 10 more years, okay? And so what I did was I actually decided in my 3rd year at Boston College Law School to run for state representative in Malden and Melrose, and I won. And so, like Caroline, my goal is to avoid ever having a client, and so far I've avoided it my whole life. Because my plan was not to write wills or contracts, notwithstanding how much more money I would have made, I have been, and I continue to be the lowest paid graduate of my law school class. But I'm a very happy person because my clients are working for people who need help, who can't afford lawyers, right? And so that's really what public servants do. They work for those people, and that's what the Kennedy School does. So keep studying hard, but don't get locked in. Think of it, be ambitious. I guess I would say be ambitious generally, but not specifically, okay? Don't get trapped into kind of what everyone else is saying they're going to do. Leave open the options for what a law degree can do, because you can take it into almost any part of American society, or global society. It's a passport to do whatever you want. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
I think that's a great place to end. I personally thought your qualifications were selling ice cream on Lexington Green, but now I find it's
you want me to tell that one story?
Okay, tell that
all
one
right,
story.
I'll tell that one story. So, all right, so here's how I started. So, my mother was mad. My mother said, you should have studied harder, Eddie. I don't know why you didn't get that scholarship. It's your fault. You think your father's going to take a second job? That's not going to happen. Think I'm going to go to work? That's not going to happen. You should have just studied harder. So we'll sign any loans you want, but you're going to pay them back. Okay? But so what I did was, for 4 years in college, I drove an ice cream truck from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And it's a big truck, and you got to pay for the lease, you got to buy your own ice cream, buy your own gasoline, find your own customers. I'm from Malden. I could figure out Malden, but then they say, you should try Lexington. So I'm 18 years old. I go out to Lexington, not Malden. So I'm there for about a month, and the way ice cream trucks work is you got to ring the bell. It's Pavlovian. So you want the kids to know at 6:05 every day on First Street, I'm there. You'll miss it. And 6:10 on 2nd Street, it's just Pavlovian. That's how it's efficient businessman. So you're 18, so I'm figuring it out. So one day I decided to go down to the Lexington Green. I saw all these people there. So I pull up. Well, all of a sudden, I got all these people around me, and there's one final kid, and I'm waiting and a policeman comes in and says, no selling of ice cream downtown. So do I sell it to this final kid who's looking up with the money in his hand for the double fudgicle? Or do I just close the window? So I said, what would you like? And the police officer just shut the window. Says, follow me. So presently, I was over in the police station with the police chief and this officer, and he pulled out the 1798 town ordinance prohibiting the sale of victuals by means of ringing a bell within the boundaries of the town of Lexington. And so we will escort you down to the Arlington-Lexington line on Massachusetts Avenue, and if you don't come back again, it's okay. But if you come back again, it's 30 days under the town ordinance in that cell right over there. So the next night, I came back. However, I did not have to ring my bell, because it's 6:05, kids would be on First Street, 6:10, but I told them, I cannot sell ice cream to you. I've been kicked out of the town of Lexington. So the mothers came down, the kids are crying. And the next Tuesday night, at the Board of Selectmen meeting, there were 25 mothers and kids wondering how there could be a town ordinance prohibiting ice cream for the children of Lexington. And on my first political victory at age 18, by a 5-0 vote, the town of Lexington Board of Selectmen overturned the 1798 statute. And I said to myself, I might have a career in politics. I understand organizing, huh? And so my challenge to you is on gun control, on climate change, on DACA, on immigration, on discrimination in our society. You all have careers in changing our country and putting on the books the laws that give opportunities to everyone in our society. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all for